Okay, so hopefully this is our third and final part for the Gorman and Sullen trap. We're going to start with Chapter 7 on book talking. And I know that the other book, The Making the Match by Terry Lassane, talked about book talking, so you guys should already be familiar. So basically, if you ask yourself, what is a book talk? It could be a paperback blurb performance. It could be a presentation designed to motivate the audience to pick up the book, check it out. It's kind of a sales pitch or a commercial, if you want to think of it that way. So the goal of a book talk is to persuade, convince, and manipulate your audience to buy, and I'm using air quotes, into a product that's your book. Using tools, you can use humor, you can use creativity, you can use knowledge. Any of those different techniques will help you hopefully connect with the audience and get them to want to check out those books. So the do's and don'ts, the cardinal rule of book talking is to sell, don't tell. Don't tell too much, don't tell too little, don't give away the end, any of those things. This book had some different do's and don'ts than the Lassane book. Some were very similar, but we'll go through these do's. Do have realistic expectations. Know that not every kid is going to be interested in every book that you talk about. Do bring books with you to check out if you go into a classroom to do this, or you're somewhere doing the book talk. If you're in your library, if you've got those books with you, have them ready to be checked out. Memorize your book talks, but you can have a cheat sheet, little cards. You can vary the themes and types of talks. You do need to come prepared to ad-lib and interact. That's something that teens need. You need to vary the lengths of the talks. You need to start strong and end strong. I would always choose a book that I absolutely loved to lead off my book talk series, and then I'd always end with one of my absolute favorites. I'd kind of vary the ones. I never talked about ones I didn't like. Well, actually I did, but that was early on and I realized my mistake. But I tried to kind of vary some of the other ones that maybe I didn't absolutely love, but I thought that the students would love, in somewhere in the middle. Do be organized, cool, and confident. Relax and enjoy yourself. Measure your success. One of the things that I could do for test evidence was to, if I loaded a lesson plan where I was going to do book talks on a specific genre, maybe the biographies in Mr. Van Everett's class, he wanted every 6th grade pre-AP student to read a biography on someone who was tied to U.S. history. Then I could run the circulation report before I did the book talks, and then I could run the circulation statistics after and show, that there was measurement that it did work, hopefully. Do learn from your mistakes, and we'll talk about some of the ones that I've made. Don't book talk books you haven't read. This is something that I remember vividly when the Teen Book Award came out several years ago. In 2009, a committee had gotten together and they created the Arkansas Teen Book Award. It was a cooperative effort between the public and school librarians across the state. Arkansas had always recognized the quality of children's literature through the Charlie May Simon Award and the Arkansas Diamond Awards, but those only went up through 6th grade. So in 2009, the Arkansas libraries were librarians. Their goal was to try to fill the gap to get the young adult literature beyond just the 6th grade level. There were 2 different levels created because of, if you think about, if you're doing 7th through 12th grade, there's a huge difference in a 7th grade boy than there is a 12th grade boy, or 12th grade girl for that matter. So they did 2 different levels. Level 1 was 7th through 9th grade, and then level 2 is geared toward 10th through 12th grade. So when the award came out, or the first book list came out in 2009, I needed to think about, I still had 5th, 6th, and 7th grade in my middle school library, and I have a very conservative patron, group. The students are very conservative, and their parents are too, for the most part, or were. So I looked through the list, just to make sure that they followed my selection policy. I had to make sure that they were appropriate for the grade levels that I offered. I wasn't trying to censor so much, but just you have to know your patrons. So I had chosen several of the books. I didn't buy everything on the list. I did, though, share the list with the students and let them know that I hadn't read the others, but, there was the list. If they read at least one, they could vote. But the ones that I did get in, one of them on the list was called Audrey Waite. And when I had done my research, I tried, I looked at School Library Journal, I looked at Book List, Hornbook, all of those, reputable resources to see if they were appropriate, and followed my selection policy. But then I also had gone to Amazon, and I love that you can read like the customer reviews, because a lot of times the customers will bring up some other things that maybe you go, I don't know that these are right for my students. So I had read through, and one of the customer reviews said something about the young lady. It's basically a boyfriend-girlfriend. They break up. She breaks up with him, and this young man, he writes this hit song called Audrey Waite, and it becomes this huge success. And they live, I think, in a small town, but when others realize that she is the subject of that song, they just kind of inundate her with a lot of things. So she goes to hide at her place of work. She works at the dairy barn, kind of like a Dairy Queen. And one of the customer reviews on Amazon said, now if you're offended, she does drink heavily one day, and it's milkshakes, and that's what it said in there. So I thought, oh, okay, we can do this. My 7th graders, I think they can handle that. They can even handle, bad words and other things that happen. But when I got the book, I ended up reading it before I had put it on the shelf. And I have to say, it's one that I would have had a hard time defending if somebody had challenged it. I didn't think it was a good read. It had sex and drugs and all kinds of things all the way through it. But there wasn't any kind of positive message or any kind of moral message that I could find. So it was one that I ended up not putting on my shelf. But the funny thing was, the junior high librarian, her books must have come in about the same time. And I guess we were at a meeting, and she said, oh, I book talked all those books on that Teen Book Award list. She said, I bought all the ones for level 1. And I said, oh. I said, well, did you read any of them first? She said, no, I didn't have time. She said, Audrey Waite was really popular. And I said, well, I'd be curious to know what you thought of it. I don't know. I found it to be trash. But so I'm kind of curious if anyone else liked it. But don't book talks you haven't read, books that you haven't read, because you're liable to find things that maybe you didn't realize were in there. Don't book talk books you don't like or wouldn't recommend. Don't gush. Don't give away the ending, the secret, or the surprise. Don't just give a book review. Don't label a book by race or gender. And that's something that I've done quite often, and I realized my mistake. I needed to just stop that. So, kids will read what they want to read. Don't oversell. Don't read out loud unless absolutely necessary. And I don't actually agree with this one. If you can find a great passage that will be your hook to grab those kids, then I say by all means read out loud to them. Don't talk about sex, drugs, or violence without knowing your audience. Some of my audiences, I could have, enticed them to read if I was talking about Soldier's Heart by Gary Paulson and a young man gets his head blown off. But there were other classes that I didn't book talk those kinds of books just because I knew what students I had in there. The book also says don't book talk books you don't have multiple copies of, and I don't necessarily agree with that. I would say don't book talk the same books, if you're doing 5 classes in a day, don't hold on to the books and book talk every single period, or you're going to have 30 or 40 kids wanting that one copy of the book. So instead, kind of like with the book pass, I would recommend having, some that you're going to talk about with first period and some you're going to talk about with second period, and on and on. Don't be boring. I thought that was kind of a funny thing. I would hope you're not boring. Top 10 justifications for book talking. It should contribute to the increased circulation in your library. It promotes your library, lets the audience get to know the library media specialist. It can promote a specific part of the collection. So for example, if I was doing those book talks on those biographies, that way I could highlight that section of the library. Or if I was doing only historical fiction, so you can highlight different genres as well. It does provide an opportunity to be creative, and one of the most creative book talk methods I saw was with one of our 6th grade literacy teachers. She had the students come up with 3 items to bring in to share as part of the book talk, and they made connections with those. So one time Miss Freeman, she was the teacher that did that, she did a book talk on Becoming Naomi Leone. It's one of the most fantastic books by Pam Munoz Ryan. If you haven't read it, get it. It was wonderful. It's an older title, probably 10 years old now, 15 years, I'm not sure. But when Miss Freeman was doing the book talk on that, she had a bar of soap and a couple of other items. The little girl in the book, or the young lady in the book, she did carvings, and so Miss Freeman had carved out, I think, a duck out of the soap, and so I thought that was just a neat thing. Something that I got to do, she had me come and model a book talk for her classes. So I did one on the Once Upon a Marigold. And if you haven't read that one, I think it's by Jean Ferris. It's wonderful. It's a fantasy fiction. But it starts out, it's very dark and dreary, and it's in this forest, and the person telling the story is talking about how scared and how dark it gets, and how he probably should go ahead and get somewhere safe. But you find out he's a troll. So one of the things that I brought in a picnic basket, and in the picnic basket I had a little troll doll, and I had a little blue, or a picture of a little boy in a blue suit. It happened to be my son when he was, I think, 3, in this little blue sailor suit. But within that first chapter, this troll finds this little boy in a blue suit, and the little boy follows him home. So, you know, I was introducing the characters that way, and the troll kept all of his most important items in this old picnic basket. So those were the 3 items that I took. It does reach more students if you book talk. Your primary audience is typically your non-library or non-reader, non-library user or non-reader. So you're really trying to hook them, trying to grab those kids. According to this text, it's one of the most effective activities to promote reading because the kids will check out. They want to hear what you are reading. It increases the audience's awareness of the Library Media Center resource as a resource, and it provides an opportunity to build relationships. So there are some models for book talking. You can do it as if it were a paperback blurb, but don't just read directly from the back of the book. You can do it as a movie preview. You call those book trailers. You can make them very short and powerful. The pop music single, that idea I found kind of interesting in the text. I don't know that I would do well with that one. Or you could create several jokes, make them short, funny, with a punchline, you know, to tell a little bit about the book. And some different methods of how you can start. I don't know why I said common types. You can use mood. You can set the mood, share an experience, something that just kind of hooks the reader. You can talk about the high points of the plot, but again, don't give away too much. You can act as if you were a character and present in the first person. And that was a method that I had seen done by some students at Harding University when they were going through a disciplinary literacy class. And it really was a great idea to present as if you were the book character. Or you can start with the scene, tell about the characters, set the mood, share that scene, give just a little bit of background, but again, don't give too much. Always start your book talk with some type of hook. It could be, you know, a character description, start with a question, or some really, you know, big action intense method, or some type of shocker. And if you look at page 175, it lists the rules for book talking. So chapter 8, this one is on outreach and partnerships. Partnerships in the community begin with asking, who else in your community touches the lives of teens? Then ask, what do you have to offer each other in order to create a viable partnership? So if you look at figure 8.1 on page 206, it starts a chart with potential community partners. So this isn't a very good copy, so hopefully you will go and look at figure 8.1. But you can see that there are lots of different categories for coming up with community partners. Some of our best ended up being some of those like supermarkets that we had within Greenbrier as our community. Larger places seem to be able to offer more. We don't have a YMCA or a YWCA. We don't have any after-school programs or homeless youth programs or some of those other things. We don't have GED classes or private schools really within our community. I don't know of any more. But you can always partner with the police or some of the other things. We had a great resource in Officer Woody in talking about internet safety in our school, because his daughter, Casey Woody, had been abducted and murdered when she was at Greenbrier Middle School, and he was on our police force, and he and the group of students that were in Casey's class had put together some really, really impactful programs that they would come around to the schools, and I felt like it was definitely relevant and something that the students listened to throughout the years when they would come and do those programs. Do be mindful when you first start any type of partnership. It's going to be a learning experience for you and the partners, so you need to be patient and flexible. Try to avoid the appearance of favoritism. So that was one of the things. We had harps in Greenbrier, and we had some other stores that were willing to do things, but sometimes we forgot about them just because Harps was so good. Same thing with the banks. First Security, First Service Bank, all of those were always willing to donate to any type of book program that I worked on, but I had to make sure that I kind of spread it out and I didn't stick with just one group. Especially in such a small community. Communicate with one another, celebrate success, share the credit, and be collaborators so that, those programs can continue. So if you didn't take time, go back and look at page 213. How well do you know your school librarian colleagues? I thought these questions were very interesting. If you're in a school district and you don't know all of the names of the librarians, you may be missing out on something, because there are definitely ways that you can partner with your middle school and your high school if you're at the elementary school, or your high school can partner and mentor with your middle school students. But I'm curious, I always knew all of the names of our librarians. Now, some of the things that I may not have known was how many classes and students did they see and instruct in a day, because at the secondary level, it's typically a little more flexible. So sometimes it was interesting to get the 3 elementary librarians, and now I think there's 4, and see the discrepancy in how many classes they had in a day, from one elementary to another. Do their school libraries have a formal collection development policy? Well, within Greenbrier and within Morrilton, I know that we all use the same selection policy because it was in our district handbook. And I believe it was at Conway too, but I can't attest to that because I was only there such a short time. So you might go back and see if you know the answers to most of these within your own district. The last one, what is the Strengthening Kids' Interest in Learning in Libraries Act, the Skills Act? That one, I don't know that it really ever went anywhere. It's back in 2015. I think it was the last time it's really mentioned in the legislature, and I think now it may be part of ESSA, Every Student Succeeds Act. But the No Child Left Behind Act in school libraries, when I was there, it definitely had a huge impact because it talked about funding for school libraries. So there were a lot of things I didn't like about No Child Left Behind, but that was one of the things that I did miss as a school librarian once it left. There is no set number or amount to keep libraries up to date. So Chapter 9 is on programming, and it was pages 223 to 261. So what is a program? It's a library-sponsored activity that takes place outside of the context of reference services or regular school library instruction. I did add that in. The textbook was talking mainly about public libraries. It should be designed to inform, entertain, or enrich a group of people as well as promote the use of the library and its collection. So this is what you need to focus on for assignment 3. Think about what kind of program you're going to do. I will say in the young adult level, quantity does not always equal success. What the book was talking about there, if there's a large number participating in certain types of program activities like a book club or some other reflective interaction-based activity, 30 kids in a session, especially teenagers, will limit the time each can respond, but it also will most likely keep most of them from interacting. So differences between teen and children's programming. Mobility. Teens choose to be there. For little kids, typically the parent takes them, and so they're there because their mom or dad brought them. But teens do have that mobility. Parent involvement or lack of might be, a difference in why more children attend small kid programs rather than those teen ones. Choices. Teens have free time and they have attitudes about how they want to spend that free time. So successful programs, things that you might want to definitely look for would be choosing a popular topic, and think hands-on when you're thinking popular topic. Partner with other groups or organizations, and that's something that's kind of key for this assignment 3. Look for some outside resources. Promote, don't just publicize, but you can't just put up flyers. You really have to promote, especially if you are working with young adults. You want to connect with young adult lives, so you need some type of youth involvement for a successful program. So when you start thinking about planning your program, and I know that some of you guys, if you are already secondary certified, you're going to have to work with elementary. If you're elementary certified, you're going to have to work with secondary. But so I guess I'm talking more to those elementary people when you're trying to figure out how are you going to create this program for young adults. Ask teens to pitch in. Have them brainstorm, plan, implement, evaluate. Now, if you're in the secondary level and you have to plan one for an elementary student, you can still use your students, your teenagers, to pitch in and brainstorm and plan and help you implement your own program for those elementary students. So don't not use the grade level that you work with when you start planning this, but just make sure that your program is for those elementary students, whatever grade level or whatever key population you're looking at. Be cognizant of schedules. Do the programs during times that your teenagers can attend. If you know that Tuesday night is basketball game night or softball practice or whatever for the majority of kids you're trying to promote this program for, don't do it on Tuesday night. Be creative. Think outside the box. Be almost spontaneous. Sometimes events do just come together, especially at that teen level. The last minute, I'd be doing something and my 7th graders would come up with some random idea and I'd say, oh yeah, let's go ahead and do that. One year they planned a Christmas party the last week before we got out for Christmas for all of the library workers. They wanted to get together, do a Dirty Santa. I was like, sure, we can do that. I didn't know how it would turn out. It was great. It was a lot of fun. So go ahead. If they suggest it, do it if you can manage it. If you're working with 12 to 13-year-olds, maybe that 6th, 7th grade level, they want to be teenagers. Their opinions are really unfiltered, so some ideas that you could work with them on are origami, some basic cooking, makeup. A lot of girls want to be those teenagers, but they may not know how to apply makeup. Babysitting safety. You could come up with some type of scavenger hunts, PG film festivals, comics. Now, just make sure with PG film festivals, make sure that you follow copyright and you've got either one of those site licenses or something so you can show that movie. If you're working with those 14 to 15-year-olds, so this is more those 8th and 9th graders, they want some maybe monthly discussion topics. They do want to express themselves, so if you've got opportunities for crafts for them, some type of poetry slam, video contest, journal making, health and wellness, they're very interested in their bodies and how to take care of them, how to make paper. Again, you could do those PG film festivals. Now, the 16 to 18-year-olds, this is more those 10th through 12th graders. They want practical applications. They do have some filtered opinions. They have learned how to not just blurt things out, but a lot of them do have like a certain niche that they work in. So they might want some type of prom program, SAT or ACT prep. Music production might be an option. Resume writing, car maintenance, college entrance help. They really are starting to get political, and maybe they have some, big ideas about the environment or how to save it. One of the last things you need to think about is what? Are you going to have a staff-led program, a team-led program? Are you going to have one of the staff be the presenter, or a teen be the presenter, or a combination of both? Or are you going to invite some type of outside presenter? How do you determine topics? There is a fantastic resource in the appendix, I believe, of your text that has brainstorming Dewey ideas. So it said, you can look at cultural ideas, give teens the opportunity to explore artistic or intellectual pursuits. Educational, this would be an opportunity to learn about something of interest. Informational, direct information about issues or matters that affect teens, maybe teen suicide, something, teen eating disorders. Opinion. This might be a type that would allow the teens to give their input and engage in open dialogue about community issues and other topics. One of the big things that Greenbrier had been talking about, some land was donated and they're going to finally create a city park. That was something that Greenbrier didn't have. So the community got together and did allow some ideas and opportunities to come from the kids, what they would recommend in the park. Some were completely, just couldn't be done just financially and stuff, but they came up with some really good ideas. Or you could have a recreational topic, something, that they could enjoy with the potential to learn something. So I guess it wasn't an appendix, but figure 9.1 is the table that starts the programming by Dewey. It's on page 233. So again, this isn't a very good copy, but you should be able to see it does start with the zeros, and so it gives you some different ideas for the type of program, and then it gives you a great description. And some of the things, the computer guts one, that one ended up being, it wasn't a program in my library, but we ended up with some club ideas, and one of the things was these tech geniuses that really wanted to know about computers, and that was an activity that they got to do. Amp Your MySpace, of course, this is a little bit dated, but you can read through that description and think about whatever social networking, whether it's Snapchat or something else for now. And then if you continue down, it goes from the zeros to the 100s to the 300s. I guess 200, the religion and mythology, was a little too much to try to come up with. But I loved some of these. The prom project. I know that Bologna High School does offer a prom project where they have a closet for girls if they want to trade in prom dresses and swap around. I don't know about you guys. I have 3 boys, thank goodness. One of mine had to participate in homecoming this year where he was an escort. He had to, we ended up $50, I guess, out of our pocket. He needed black slacks, which thankfully he already had, and a white button down, but I think we invested in a red bow tie and red suspenders and some fancy little, red football player socks or something. So pretty much it was $50. But when the moms were talking about the 2 dresses the girls had to wear, they wore a short one during the day for, an hour and a half for a pep rally. And then at night they sat on the football field in this big giant ball gown thing that cost one young lady, it was about $1,500. It amazes me how much they're spending on dresses that they're going to wear one time. So I think that's a great idea for a program, Money 101. That's something kids need to know, especially if you're working with at high school level. They need to know how to work with money and save it. Okay, the last 3 chapters I want to talk about, I'm going to try to hit very quickly, very briefly, so you will want to read through all of chapter 10 on Spaces and Promotion, pages 263 to 286. But things to remember, I thought this was kind of an interesting list. The A, it needs to be, ADA compliant. You need ambience. You need art within your space. Branding. C, collection development, comfort, community, space and computers. D, you need your displays. F, again, if it can work in food and drink, your library needs to be fun. Your space does. Q, they need a quiet space. T, you need technology. Think like a 7-Eleven. You want it fast, in and out. You need to think about your traffic patterns. So I just thought this was a really great kind of list to kind of hit on. So you might want to go back and look over it. Best practices for promoting. Again, I liked the letter list, even though it didn't include every letter in the alphabet. B, be a good host. Be bilingual if you can. Billboards, book reviews. Buy, purchase things for the young adults to have. Being bilingual, that was something I hadn't thought about when we put up our book fair posters. I had a young lady last year in my library. I had them, she and the other third period library worker, they were writing the posters out that we were going to put up to advertise, and we had parent-teacher conferences coming up, the next week when the book fair was going to be there. And Meridian asked, she said, "Oh, can I do one of these in Spanish?" And there was, in Scholastic, it had the information. So she just pulled open, I think one side of the poster was in Spanish, but we had to write the stuff in. So she pulled open Google Translate and translated whatever it was that we were having on the English side. She translated those into Spanish. And there was one family that came through, and the dad was Hispanic, and they looked at that poster, and then they looked over at the library, and I happened to be standing outside the library that night of parent-teacher conferences, and they said, "Oh, you did this for us." I thought that was pretty cool. I told them, "Yeah, absolutely," but, then I had to tell them Meridian was the one who did that. So here are some different ways, best ways to promote your program. Now, realistically, I don't know that mouse pads are really going to help anymore, but definitely think about radio promote. Anything within your school announcements. Think about school bus ads. One of the L's that a librarian from, I can't remember where she was from, she's the daring librarian, she said she used to do poo reads or Lou reads or something, where she would advertise stuff on the backs of the stall doors in the bathroom, and she said that was some of the best promotion she ever did. She even would post book lists and different things. So that brings us up to chapter 12 on youth involvement, pages 309 to 338. So what is youth involvement? According to the text, it's the involving of youth in responsible, challenging action that meets genuine needs, with opportunities for planning and or decision making affecting others in an activity whose impact or consequence is extended to others. It's going to recognize and nurture the strengths, interests, and abilities of young people through the provision of real opportunities for youth to become involved in decisions that affect them at individual and systemic levels. So YALSA, if you are not familiar with the American Library Association, one of their divisions is the Young Adult Library Service Association, and that they are there for the involvement of young adults in responsible action and significant decision-making that affects the design and delivery of library and information services for their peers and the community. So I highly recommend you can get a student membership for ALA. It is expensive, but the student membership is very doable. And then you can add on the American Association of School Librarians, and YALSA is one of the divisions, especially if you're going to be working with young adults, at the secondary level. Who's going to benefit if you have youth involvement? Well, the students and the community. So how? If you look for page 323, you can find some potential tasks for your teen volunteers. And if you have student library workers, it's page 323 is a great list that you can look at to see some of the tasks that you can give to them. So here's that figure. And if you look through this list, students can definitely vacuum. That was one task that we had every Friday, was my library workers had to dust. I gave them specific shelves they were responsible for, and they had to check to make sure, would ask them once a week at least to read the shelves, kind of go along, skim, and make sure if it was a fiction shelf, there were any nonfiction there. They would straighten the books, keep track, or reshelve, or if things were out of order, they would go back and put those together. But we'd also dust the shelves, and then they'd vacuum the library and dust the computers. If you look over at any of the other things, helping troubleshoot with computers, every once in a while I'd get a great kid that totally knew what to do and how to do that. And so if I had a class in there, I would usually have the kids come over, the library workers, once they were done either checking in or checking out the books, they would come over and help with those computer tasks. You can have them do a lot of things. If you are working with high school students, you can also maybe partner with your elementary schools and see if there are days. My kids on World Read Aloud Day, they Skyped and did Google Hangout with different classes in our community, and they would read out loud to them. On Dr. Seuss Day, they did the same thing. So don't limit yourself with what your library workers can do, based on your student age level. All students can do something. This year, my 4th grader at his elementary school, he's K-5 school, his librarian has first grade, like 80 first graders in her library at one time. First of all, I think I would go insane. I don't know that I could do that. But she had some makerspaces and different activities set up for them during their prowl time, which the other kids that needed specific one-on-one help, they were in small groups in classrooms getting some extended reading time. So the librarian is the one she's in charge of the first graders. And like I said, it's about 80 of them. Well, during that prowl time, there were some 4th graders that didn't need any extra help. And my son happens to be one of them. So she asked if she could have some of those key 4th grade students to come in and help with the different stations. And so Lonnie gets to do that every morning, and he absolutely loves it. We were at Walmart the other day, and this little boy came up and said, "Hi, Lonnie." And, it's really cute. And Lonnie, when we were walking away, I said, "Is he in your class?" He said, "No, Mom, he's a first grader." I said, "Oh, well, how does he know you?" He said, "He's one of my kids. I guess Lonnie is assigned one group, and he goes around with them, to the computer station, or if they're doing a makerspace creative activity, he's the one in charge of that spot." And there's some other 4th graders, and it really has given him a sense of ownership. And he's not a teenager, but, he can definitely help out. Which brings us up to Chapter 13, Issues in Young Adult Services. And this chapter is 339 to 351. I thought some of these questions were kind of interesting, so I just kind of wanted to touch on them. So questions that young adults might ask. Can you help me find a term paper online? I don't think a lot of them are going to ask you that anymore because they can Google it and find the stuff. But these were things, I guess, that show how you have to be unflappable. Do you have a copy of The Anarchist Cookbook? Can I check out this copy of the Fight Club DVD? You have to know, this would be more public library oriented. They, I guess, need to know who their patrons are and know, you can't keep kids from checking things out at that level, so you have to be just very careful. Can you help me download music from the internet? Well, obviously, if they're asking for that, which, again, I don't, Napster, I think this might have been from that time. A lot of them probably aren't going to ask that, but if they are, you need to, then be able to talk about copyright infringement and things. They might ask you, can you help me find what started World War II? And while you're at it, can you tell me what countries were involved and who was the axis of evil? That's when you need to take them and show them how to find information, how to use those information literacy skills. So I thought these were just kind of interesting, and I sure hope no kid in your library is going to come up and ask if you have a copy of Playboy, could they look at that? But I just found those questions just to be kind of funny. Questions parents might ask. And again, this is a public library, and we'll touch on student privacy laws, in the school. But my son tells me he has all these fines on his card. I'll pay them, but I want to know what books were late and what other books are checked out. I believe at a public library they can't tell them. As long as I'm here, I want to pick up any books that my daughter has on hold. Can you get them for me? Legally, I guess, unless the daughter has called and given express permission, I don't know that they can do that either. This was an example of an over-the-phone call. I want to know if my son's there. He's supposed to come home after school. Can you page him? My son has the paper to do it. Those would be things that parents might ask. Now, in a school library, and interpretation is different. There are some that think that you cannot even tell a parent or guardian, what a student has checked out at all, period. You can't tell them the title. You can't tell them anything about it except maybe how much the book costs. I tend to disagree, and I believe Cassandra Barnett has kind of touched on it before. If legally you are their parent or guardian and they have not reached the age of 18 years old, I think it's okay to, if the child lives with them, that is the guardian, if it's grandparent, whatever, I think they legally have the right to be able to see what their child has checked out. Now, I have had parents in that past tell me not to let their child check out a book because they don't want it lost, which, I guess that's a parent prerogative, but I did ask them then to always have the student bring a book with them, because when they would come to the library, one of the activities we did a lot of times was, read our books. Some of the kids, desperately wanted a book, and I never really thought that was fair, but a lot of times I felt like I had to follow the wishes of the parent. Or I've had them ask me not to let them check out, certain materials. And that's a conversation that they and the student and I would have to sit down and talk about, because it wasn't fair to put me into the position. They didn't want them to check out Harry Potter for me to have to monitor that. So I always asked for us to have an opportunity to meet together and kind of go over the rules. And that way, it put it back on the child's shoulders to know that I knew what it was. But, when I had 570 kids, it's hard to remember which kid couldn't check out Harry Potter. Questions an administrator might ask. Why do you have that spin magazine in the teen area of the library? Administrators will question what you want to buy. If you have a reason for it that's valid, then they should be okay with that. So that should be the end of our presentation for today. So before you get ready to take quiz number 2, make sure that you've accessed all of the materials within our folder. Make sure you've read your text. Have your text close. While you're taking the quiz, there is no time limit. You can use any resources you have, but you cannot phone a friend. Once you start the quiz, you do need to finish the entire thing. But like I said, there is not a time limit, except it is due, whatever our due date is. Just make sure you get it taken by that time. Enjoy your week. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. Let me know how you're doing.